Hi friends, I'm making this video to tell you about something big that's happening in Pittsburgh right now. You may or may not have heard, but Pittsburgh is about to embark on the city's largest public infrastructure project in the history of the entire region. It's a $2 billion project. When was the last time that you heard of anything in Pittsburgh measuring in the billions of dollars? This project has to do with our region's most abundant resource, water. The way that we implement this project has a direct impact on our health, the economy, and our city's ability to be sustainable. I went around town to learn more about this issue, and I talked with folks who've been working on some innovative solutions.
My name is Sarah Madden. I work for the 9 Mile Run Watershed Association. I am a design manager there. I deal mostly with residential green infrastructure projects, designing and installing them, like mostly rain gardens. My background is in landscape architecture. I have just been very interested in projects that creatively manage stormwater runoff in an environmentally responsible way.
So you want to say a little bit about what's going on in Pittsburgh with the stormwater management stuff?
So the biggest issue that we're faced with here in Pittsburgh is that every time it rains, our three rivers act as a depository for raw sewage. And how that happens is our cities were designed with combined sewer and stormwater infrastructure. In dry weather, water and wastewater in your home, goes down the drain, goes down to the toilet, to a pipe, and then it's treated at a sewage facility at Alcosan. And that's in dry weather, and it works pretty seamlessly. And what happens when there's actually wet weather is that those same pipes that carry sewage and the wastewater from your home, all the runoff from roadways, rooftops, and streets are collected and taken to the treatment facility via the same pipe. However, those pipes are relatively small now that the city has expanded. So what happens when those pipes are overtaxed is that they deposit raw sewage into our rivers because there's too much going into these pipes, too much to actually make it to Alcosan. So these pipes were designed with overflows in them, and it's called a sewage overflow. So when all this water enters the system, too much of it backs up and then goes into our rivers. So it's one of the biggest problems that we're faced with in the city of Pittsburgh.
When was the current infrastructure designed?
Oh my gosh. In the early development of the city. With sewer infrastructure and most underground infrastructure, it's something that is installed, and then after that happens, not much more in terms of maintenance. It's only kind of addressed when there's an actual problem. So these pipes were put under us long before we were here, long before we were born, and not much has happened to them since in terms of maintenance or anything like that. We've just had communities and households tying into them, and more roads draining stormwater runoff into them, and thus we're faced with the issue of these systems being overtaxed with all the water that enters them.
How does it affect the water quality or the water sheds in Pittsburgh right now?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a public health issue that a lot of times the water is obviously unsafe for human contact, mostly after rain events. And generally there are the health department, I believe, has warnings on our waters. And during certain rain events, obviously you don't want to go near the rivers or swim in the rivers or touch the rivers during a rain event, because obviously that's when the most concentration of sewage is entering them. A few days of dry weather, that kind of gets flushed out, and you may be able to do things like kayaking, or if you're brave, swim. But yes, obviously it's a public health to have E. coli and fecal matter in our streams. Not to mention, there's a lot of research done as to what kind of pharmaceuticals are being put into the streams, because a lot of people are on medication, they use the restroom, it can possibly end up into the stream. So obviously there's a lot in the form of E. coli, and, unknown kind of toxins and chemicals.
So basically anything that people flush down the toilet in the city infrastructure can possibly end up in the stream.
Yeah.
Whenever it rains. How much?
Currently, Three Rivers wet weather indicates that it's 1/10 of an inch of rain that can cause a sewer overflow, and the average average rainfall event in the city of Pittsburgh, I believe, is 1/4 of an inch. So it's very likely, every time it rains, for a little bit, that there's sewage going into our rivers.
So this is happening more than a couple of times a year.
Absolutely, yeah. More than a couple times a month, likely. Not to mention, I'm not sure how many CSOs actually exist, but there are more than one. I mean, it's upwards of 200, I believe, along the rivers, depositing sewage along the rivers. So there's a lot going in.
For decades, Pittsburgh has violated the Federal Clean Water Act. Alcosan is the public organization that manages wastewater in the city. And for years, they've paid fines since it was cheaper to pay the fines than it was to fix the problem. And because the city has never faced such an expensive issue before. Then in 2007, the EPA put Alcosan under what's called a consent decree, where they required Alcosan to fix the problem once and for all. Over the past year, Alcosan's been putting together a plan on how they are going to fix the problem. The plan in its current state is to install giant subway-sized tunnels under the rivers. Many believe, though, that there are more sustainable ways for us to manage our most precious resource, water.
The city of Pittsburgh is actually under a consent decree by the EPA to actually stop this from happening. So the city and Alcosan is currently preparing a plan to eliminate this occurrence. The current plan is incredibly expensive, and there currently is no recommendation for the use of green infrastructure, which is a way to manage some of our stormwater in a more naturalistic kind of way. The current plan that I just spoke of includes digging larger tunnels. So like I mentioned, all of the stormwater runoff enters the pipes and it gets overtaxed. So obviously making a larger pipe would allow for more water, more sewage to be in these pipes. This is going to be an enormous expense. Plus, this expense is going to be inherited by us and likely our great-grandchildren. So why green infrastructure is a favored alternative by a lot of people is that if this public investment is going to have to happen, which it needs to happen, as opposed to keeping it underground in large tunnels, with green infrastructure, treating things in a more naturalistic kind of way, having stormwater drain into parks, designing features in parks that can manage the stormwater, having green roofs, having rain barrels, a whole combination of these types of infrastructure can possibly eliminate the amount of water, or lessen the amount of water going into these pipes, and possibly eliminate the need for these huge tunnels that no one would ever see, and likely no one would ever, they would be installed and no one would ever see them again until, 200 years go by and this has to happen again, potentially.
So that's currently the deal of how we're managing our water. There's a bunch of alternative ideas about how we can manage our water in other ways, and I'll show you those in my next video.